Welcome to the Ryan Frank Podcast. Ryan is a family man, first and foremost, but he's also a pastor, publisher, and serial entrepreneur. This podcast will help you think, work, and create like never before.
Welcome to the Ryan Frank Podcast. This is Ryan Frank, and thank you so much for tuning in. You know, you and I can stay connected every day. I'm so grateful if you listen to the podcast. The challenge with the podcast is it's only once a week, but we can stay connected every day on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, you can get my text messages. All of those links can be found at ryanfrank.com. If you are on social media and we are not connected, let's get connected. Every day I'm posting with the goal of encouraging you and speaking life over you and what God has called you to do. So once again, visit ryanfrank.com and you'll find all of the links to my social media, my podcast, my YouTube, where we can stay connected on a daily basis. Hey, are you enjoying the new podcast? I am so grateful to the team at 1230 Media who is producing this podcast for me. I'm grateful for my team at Kids Matter who is helping facilitate these interviews and coordinate them for me. And I'm grateful for you that you are tuning in. I want to remind you that this updated Ryan Frank podcast is not only available as an audio podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, it's also available as a video podcast, a YouTube version. And again, once again, all of those links can be found at ryanfrank.com. Let me ask you a question. When I mention the word systems, do you get excited or are you like, ugh, right? Today we're going to talk about the importance of systems. And I'm going to introduce to you a close advisor of mine, as well as a dear friend, Corey Jones. Corey Jones is the co-host of the Kids Matter podcast. He's a part of our Kids Matter Conference leadership team, and he's a systems guy. He was a children's pastor. He is now an executive pastor, and day after day, he is organizing systems and executing systems that he has put in place. And so whether you find yourself to be system-oriented or not, you're going to find a lot of value in today's podcast. We're going to talk about different management styles. We're going to talk about what kind of systems are essential that you put into place in your life. And then what are some resources that you can begin absorbing, whether it's podcasts or books, to help you grow to be a better systems person. Here's the thing. I want you to think, work, and create like never before. But for that to happen, you have to have capacity to think more, and to work more, and to create more. It's all about putting the right systems and structures in place in your life. So with all that being said, let's get this show on the road. Here is Corey Jones. Hey, what's up, Corey? Welcome to the Ryan Frank Podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Man, it's nice to be here with the Ryan Frank.
The Ryan Frank and the Corey Jones. Normally, we're talking together on the Kids Matter podcast with Amber and whatever guest we have. And today it's just you and me. I'm flying in some high clouds with the Mr. Jones himself. Corey, how are you? Things going good?
Man, I'm doing good. We're in this Christmas season. I don't know when your episode airs, but it's an exciting time to be around the church. And so I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
It is. So let's, in the introduction, I talked a little about you and our relationship and friendship and so on, but let's jump into your ministry journey. So, you're an executive pastor at this really great, thriving church in the suburbs of Atlanta, but you didn't start there. Would you kind of rewind and unpack your bit of your spiritual journey as well as your ministry journey and what's led you up to this point where you're serving at this great church in this capacity?
Yeah. So if you go real far back, like I got a postcard in the mail for a vacation Bible school, and it was addressed to Corey Jones.
Really?
And I was so excited to get mail. I was that age. I was like probably, 8. And I went to VBS, and through like a longer story, but I found the Lord through that church, and very young, maybe 10, felt called into ministry. and explored that in high school. I started doing kids ministry at a real small church, and they gave me an opportunity. Went to seminary at Mid-Atlantic Christian University in Eastern North Carolina. And while a student, I did KidMin at a pretty cool church. It's like an hour and a half drive from the school, so that wasn't fun.
Okay, yeah.
And then after graduation, my wife and I we want to be at a church and really put down roots. Where in the world is God calling us to? And I fully trusted him. It was one of those Abraham moments of where you say to go, we'll go. We went to Carrollton, Georgia, knowing one person in the entire state of Georgia who to this day we still haven't talked to. And I've been here for 13 years. I started as a kids minister and then moved into next gen ministry and then was promoted to executive pastor. And so now I oversee money and people for all of our stuff.
I love it. Corey, when you were 10 years old, let's go back to that for a minute. When you sensed this calling to ministry, did something happen in your life at church? Were you at an event, or was it like like you started thinking about being a pastor or working in the church?
Yeah,
what happened when you were 10? I
distinctly remember being at a woodland camp. I think that's what it's called. And I'm at this camp and I'm thinking about this call to ministry, and like I'm watching my youth pastor do what he does and thinking, man, to be able to, like, for a career, tell people about the Lord, that's exciting. And I also thought, well, maybe I could be a dentist and make a lot of money. That sounds fun too.
Did you really think that? Was dentist on your radar? Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was praying about it in the morning. I went outside early, which I was wide awake, and went outside and was praying about ministry. And then walked into the cafeteria for our breakfast, and the youth pastor pulled me aside and started talking to me about ministry. And I was like, really, that's interesting, but didn't really think much of it. And then when I got into the line for my food, he introduced me to the chef person I was serving food, cafeteria worker, as a future pastor. And I was like, wow, like I was thinking about that this morning, and then he talked about it and then speaking it over me. And it was one of those things where, like, at that point I went, well, I for real could do that. And it just never left me. So it came in at that point.
What, man, that is incredible. You know, we talk a lot about the power of words and speaking into people's dreams and destinies. But isn't that something, as a 10-year-old in line at camp, this pastor introduced you as a future pastor? And that obviously, I mean, you still remember that today. That made a deep impact in your life.
My eggs.
Yeah. So you're 11, 12, 13, 14, you're preteen going into high school, still thinking about church. At that point, are you thinking maybe I'll pastor a church, like preach sermons, or were you thinking youth pastor? What were you thinking as a kid?
So as a 8th grader, I wrote the college which I eventually graduated from.
Okay.
And said, hey, how do I apply? I want to do youth ministry. And I forgot actually all about that until I worked at the college, and I did what most people probably do. I pulled my old file and saw that letter that I'd wrote at 8th grade that I wanted to get there to do youth ministry. Man. But for me, Ryan, honestly, I never felt called to youth ministry or kids ministry or preaching ministry. For me, it was always, I feel called to pastor people, to disciple them, to evangelize them. And I think where I find myself today in this executive pastor role, it's just following the gifting that God put in my place. But the calling has always just been serve his people, love his people.
Serve his people. Yeah. I love it. What are you thinking? What, are you 40 yet, Corey?
No, I'm not as old as you, man.
I know. Are you still in your 30s?
I'm 10 years younger than you.
Are you really? You young guy. Okay. So 37-year-old Corey, if you were going to roll the dice and in 30 years, Corey's 67 years old, think you'll still be working in the church? You think you'll be retired? What do you think you'll be doing?
I don't think I'll be taking a paycheck from the church,
Yeah.
but I definitely see myself still serving the bride.
Mm.
Like I told my pastor recently, I said, I could see around age 50, like I'm dual income, no kids, and I'm smart with money.
Yeah.
I could see around age 50 throttling back the pace at which I run
Mm-hmm.
and doing something to volunteer to serve the church, or maybe doing a thing where I take like 3 months off a year and just take it easy every now and then. But no,
Yeah.
I love the church. I feel called to serve, and I think it would take another direct voice of God saying, "All right, Corey, you're done," for me to ever be done with this.
I love it. Corey, you're a systems guy. You're a processor. This is what we're going to talk about today: the value of systems, the value of processes. We're all wired differently. We'll unpack that more in a few minutes. But Corey will be the first to tell you, and we'll unpack this, that this does not come easy for me, being able to put systems in place and to logically process things and build systems that you need. And Corey's one of the first guys that I'll text or call when we have an idea or we're trying to pull something off, and I'm just hitting this block on, what kind of systems to put in place. And Corey, God's given you the keen ability to organize systems, and not only to organize them, but to keep those systems moving and to make tweaks along the way. I see that in your life over and over again, and God's using that at your church where you're at. He's using it to help us at Kids Matter with the times and opportunities that you jump in and help us. Let's talk about this whole idea of systems for a minute, Corey. Why do you think it's important for leaders? Let's talk to, of course, we have a lot of ministry leaders that are watching or listening. Why is it important for us to be organized, to have systems in place when we think about the ministries of our church and what God has given us to take care of and steward?
I'd say big picture, there's just so many times that there are leaders doing the same thing year after year, but expecting different results.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, a lot of people feel like they don't have enough time to care for their volunteer teams.
Yeah.
They haven't taken the time to create a system of care. They haven't broken it down into manageable steps. And so there's always this burden and pressure of Sundays coming, and I need more volunteers. I need this vision piece out there, but I'm not taking the steps to get there. And so maybe they're not writing down a job description for a coach so that a coach can care for their team. They're not giving specific volunteers to that coach to be cared for and giving them their contact information so that they could actually do it. They're not letting a coach know what a win is and how to measure that win. And then they're not modeling to that coach what it means to care. They're just repeating the same thing, and they're not creating a repeatable process, something that's scalable.
Yes.
And in ministry, it's our job to equip the saints for acts of service, which sounds a whole lot like a system to bring order to what God has given us to entrust it and to steward it well. And so us in ministry, it's not just dreaming of what could be. And it's also not even just working really, really, really hard all the time to make it happen, but creating a system so that it doesn't all depend on you and your effort, but that the church can be healthy, where the body of Christ is actually the body.
I think it's hard for us as leaders, isn't it, to let go sometimes. We want to do everything. We want to control everything. For maybe this is more difficult for some than others. But you're right. I've never thought about that. Paul's words to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. I don't know if I've ever really thought about that in a sense of there have to be systems in that, don't there? Or you're going to be very, very limited in the amount of equipping that you're going to do and how sustainable that is.
And there's some people in ministry who, like, God absolutely has gifted. And so while they're sitting in that chair under that position, they are able to do that work. But the moment that they leave, it's empty and it's not sustainable long term.
You're right.
So I think sometimes we depend on our own understanding instead of trusting God with the people that that he's given us.
Yes. Corey and I both listened to a podcast interview that Carey Nieuwhof had on his podcast a few months back with Les McCowan. And this was the first time that I had been introduced to Les McCowan. He's been on Carey Nieuwhof's podcast several times, and they're each worth listening to. But Corey, Les, who is the founder, CEO of a company called Predictable Success, talks about different leadership styles or management styles. And I know there are 100 different ways to classify different learning styles or management styles or leadership styles. He breaks it down into 4. And I like these 4 of his because they're easy for me to remember. That, they're all good and they all are valuable. But he talks about how every team should have a good mix of these 4, and you probably have at least 1, maybe 2, maybe more, 3. I guess you could have all 4 of these in your life, but they're visionary. We're going to unpack these in a moment. Visionary. You have your visionary type leaders. You have your operational leaders, those that are able to just get things done. Then you have your processors or your systems people. And then you have what he calls synergists, or those that are just really good at pulling a team together, pulling people together, getting the input of people, building things together as a team. So you have visionary, operator, processor, synergist. I was really, really intrigued by this podcast. Were you, Corey? It was a good one.
Oh, absolutely. I thought it broke it down in a manageable way to understand, and it gave me a heart for people like you and my pastor who are visionaries.
Yes. And I don't remember if you Google the Carey Nieuwhof podcast and Les McCowan, it's one from fall, was it October, Corey? October 22?
The end of October. Yeah. Episode 528.
528. And it's toward the end of the podcast where they get into this. And Les also has, if you Google Predictable Success quiz or something like that, he's got this free assessment to help you. But Corey, let's take a minute and unpack these, because I want to talk about which ones you're strong in. And I know you've taken the survey. I want to talk about the ones I'm strong in. And then as we talk through these, I want the listeners to think about their own lives and the people that they're working with and where they're strong. So let's start with visionaries. Now, a lot of leaders are visionary, but not all leaders are visionary. Corey, when you think of a visionary leader, and when Les McCowan talks about a visionary leader, he's talking about things like what? Obviously, seeing ahead, having a vision. What else?
Dreaming of what can be and getting it started. And so, Ryan, you you wanted something for your daughter to be able to experience water. I know that was one of the things that she loved.
Yep. And
you dreamed of Lucy's Car Wash and you got it started. There's a lot of people like me who don't put those pieces together. I don't come up with the idea. I don't go, this is what could be. For me, it's you say, Lucy's Car Wash. And I go, all right, in order to do that, you're going to need a certificate of occupancy. You're going to need to pay taxes. And I break it down. So visionary, you're forward thinking, often creative, not necessarily in that artistic type, but like you like to create. You're much more of a risk taker than me. So my pastor, he's a visionary. He thinks visually, dreams of what can be, and wants to run and take that risk. Me as a processor, I'm trying to slow them down sometimes or count the cost. So visionary, they're just running. And I think when God puts a visionary in place that trusts him, you do things that are impossible.
Boy.
That a processor like me, I count the cost sometimes and go, that math doesn't make sense. Whereas my pastor and you go, but God said,
and we'll figure it out
let's
later.
Trust his math, and he's in charge. And so that visionary piece can change the world. It's amazing.
Visionaries they're often ready, fire, aim, right? Where a processor like you is ready, aim, 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 aim. Fire. So there's the visionary leaders. We all know visionary leaders. There, and then we have operators. Now, operators are your people that, man, they have this keen ability to get things done. They are great they don't overthink things, right? They don't overanalyze and scrutinize. They thrive on checking things off a to-do list. They're they're organizers, right? Why am I?
Yeah.
Operators. Organizer wasn't the word I'm looking for. Operator. They get things done. What were you saying, Corey?
It's my secondary, and I lean into that pretty heavy. I like to check off the to-do list and make sure that we're moving forward with projects, that the projects are actually crossing the finish line.
Yes.
I know on your team, Amber, like she has a strong operator. She's detail oriented,
yes.
Literal minded. She's a doer and an achiever, focused on right now. How are we going to finish this task? And it's still, some of the operators, they still have some risk tolerance. It's a little bit more moderate, but for them, it's crossing the finish line. They are the doers within your ministry or your organization.
Yes, they are. And then you have your processors. So Corey, this is where, we're talking the whole idea of this podcast is processes and systems. But this is where you score strong in this area, where you're able to put plans in place and systems in place and think things through the way, how do we get from point A to point, C or D or E? What does that look like? Where do we want to move from? You got to have some good processors, right? Or things are going to be a mess.
The processors are breaking down the vision into manageable steps. They want actionable sequences. We're usually risk averse. We slow down. My relationship with my lead pastor, he's a visionary and I'm a processor. And I had to communicate with him at one point that it's not that I'm against your vision. Hear that loud and clear. I love your vision.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the whole of the ship. And I need to poke holes in the ship to make sure that the boat's going to stay floating. And so I'm looking at the details. I'm a little bit skeptical, but I want it to be sustainable. I want it to be able to go long term. And so I'm going to ask those questions to just make sure that your vision can sustain. Because most visionaries, they're starters and they want to get it started. And an operator, they're finishers. They want it to check it off the list. The processor is more the sustainer. Is this going to go long term for us?
Yes.
Mix of both worlds there.
And we'll share how Corey and I scored in a moment. Corey Strong, processor, in his secondary is the operator. I'm strong visionary, secondary operator. So I love to get things done, and I'm not afraid to just jump in and roll up my sleeves and make things happen. Beth, my wife Beth, she's dominantly visionary, secondary processor. So she has a vision. She's able to see like, where do we need to be, and loves to brainstorm how to get there. Her challenge is she then wants to pass it off. She doesn't want to live in the world of actually making it happen. God's given her the ability to see where it needs to be and help, and let's logically talk through it. And then it needs to get passed off. It's neat how God's wired us each differently, which, one of the points is you need to make sure that that you are well balanced yourself, and that you're surrounding yourself with people that you're not all alike, so that you're complement each other and you're well-rounded. Fourth, you have the synergist, which, Corey, these are the church. Les McCowan talks about this on the podcast with Carrie Newhoff, that the church is full of synergists. These are people. Why? Because, Corey, why do you think that is? Why are most pastors, why are most people in church leadership synergists? Let you answer that one.
Synergist is someone that's harmonizing the team, and they're very people focused. And ministry is people.
It is.
And so I think just naturally the synergist, it's attractive, and the church is attractive because these are the people that are a buffer between the different areas so that everyone gets a voice. They're conflict resolution oriented. They want to empower the church. They want to make sure that the church has what they need to be who God's called it to be. And they're really just drawing the strengths of the entire team. And so I kind of think of it as we got these three over here, and then the synergist is who's holding it all together, who's making sure that we don't get to an unhealthy spot, because you can be too high in one of these areas where you're like, I'm only an operator.
Yeah.
I just got to get it done. I'm going to run over people in the process.
Yes.
The synergist is going to come alongside and go, but we care for people. That's actually why we are taking these things off the list.
Exactly. You're exactly right. He talks about this. In fact, this topic has intrigued us so much. Corey and I are both going to read over Christmas break, Les McCallan's book, The Synergist. He has several books. We're both reading The Synergist over Christmas break. He talks about how there are these 4 leadership or management styles, but you don't want to score too in in just one. And we all know people like that. You just mentioned one as an example, someone that is such an operator, and they score so high an operator, and they get stuff done like nothing else, but they run over people in the process, and they're jerks to work with, and nobody likes them. They get a lot of stuff done, but they're a bulldozer along the way. I've worked for, Corey and I were talking about this last night, preparing for the podcast. I once worked for, not at church, but a different setting, a visionary who was dominantly visionary. He probably would have scored over 900 on 1,000 scale, 900 visionary. The challenge, and so he was very, very visionary. The challenge was he was so visionary, you didn't know when to take him serious. It's like he lived, 30,000 feet in the air all the time, and he had a difficult time actually doing stuff because he just was so visionary. We could spend time on each of these. This is what's neat about taking the assessment, is you see really how you score, and it's a relatively simple assessment. Hopefully you don't score too strong in one area, but you have a few represented. So let's go over some scores here, Corey. You scored highest out of 1,000. You scored 570 as a processor, and as you said, your second was operator, 270. Synergist, which I see in you, you scored third out of 120. Were you surprised by these results? And 0 visionary. Were you surprised by the results?
Not at all. Now, I will say, when I was taking the test, there were times that I was between 2.
Yes.
Then I kept sitting there struggling with those 2. And I think if I were to retake the test, I might go a little higher in my operator, lower in my processor, because it just depends on circumstance between those 2. Yes. But I know for me, man, that synergist and visionary piece, I was not surprised at all that I scored a 0. I've told my lead pastor so many times, God, he designed the church, and Romans 12 talks about it, that there's many parts of one body, and each part has its own special function, that we belong to one another. And when he made Corey, that vision piece, it might be deep down somewhere, but I just don't see it. But for him, it's so strong, and we partner well with one another, where he can outline a vision, say a dream, and then I can process it. I mean, use my processor gift and break it down. But that vision piece, in kids ministry, when I sat in the kids min chair, there were times where people would think that I was a visionary, but there's nothing new under the sun. I Love Kidman has so many great ideas, and I would take people's ideas. That wasn't Corey coming up with that stuff. I'm not a visionary like that, but I can put a system in place to get ideas. I Love Kidman was where I got them.
And by the way, I would guess Nicole, your wife, would she be strong operator?
She would
or visionary.
I would guess operator, synergy, vision, and process.
I could see that too. Yes.
Yeah, she definitely gets stuff done. That's for sure.
Yes. I scored 570 visionary. That's my dominant.
Okay.
Secondary operator at 270. Processor at 60 and synergist at 60. So I definitely stronger in those top two. Now, Corey, let's dig into this processing stuff. What would you say to guys like me or girls like me? I'm not a girl. Guys or girls who are low processor. Is there help? Is there hope? Because I understand the need for systems and structure. But we were just talking about this, you and I, the other day, Corey, that I hit a brick wall and I struggle with it. Is there hope and help? What would you say?
Yeah, I think with each of these four, it's not that Corey can't be visionary. Just it's not my dominant. It's not my primary. And so there are times where you could, okay, Lord help me. I need some process here, and man, He's faithful. He's going to help you out. There's other times that He's going to put people in your life that can come alongside of you, and so I know you've leaned heavy into that. There's times that you call me up and go, "This is where I'm at. This is where I'm trying to go," and I go, A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Yeah,
let's
you
go.
do. Yep.
And you might need someone that can help break down your vision into manageable steps, and an operator that can hand it off and check it off, make it happen.
Yeah. What would you say to someone on the opposite end of the spectrum that is maybe such a processor, such a systems person that almost becomes a handicap? I mean, maybe there's zero action in their life because they're overanalyzing, they're over scrutinizing, they're way overthinking things. Is there help for that person?
Yeah, you can always research more. I think just realizing that, like, you can always disciple more, you can always evangelize more, you can always research more. Sometimes you just need to figure out what's a good plan B. You don't even need to spend time figuring out plan C, D, and E. And for me, I'll need to set a deadline at times for tasks. I might need to break up a big task into more manageable things and then put them on the calendar.
Good point.
So, for example, January 9, our staff has a staff advance. I'm over our staff, and so I'm supposed to know what that means. And so for me, I go, all right, it could be this. We do strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and we break that down. Or we do this, or we study this book, and I go, there's just so many different ways that our team could grow here. And if that's what I get stuck on, then the event sneaks up on everybody, and it's a bomb. And so for me, instead of getting stuck on all of those options and things, I go, okay, big picture. I need to get the date to the staff so that they have it on the calendar. I need to reserve the room. I need to order lunch. I can figure out the other priorities as it comes up. And honestly, I should probably just pull my visionary pastor into the room and go, dream with me for a second. What could this be? I can pull my operator into the room and go, okay, how are we going to get it done? And I don't need to carry all of that myself either.
Man, I love what you just said there, because that is so huge. And it takes a lot of wisdom. I don't know if wisdom is even the right word, but I admire leaders that are willing to pull other people into the room and recognize just what you said, that, you know, I need that visionary in the room. I need that they aren't so insecure and they don't feel like they've got to figure it all out themselves, but they're willing to bring other people around the table. Leaders like that are, I want to say they're unicorns because they just seem so rare, but boy, they are so valuable. And the quicker you can get there, the better off you're going to be. None of us have it all together, do we, Corey? And we need each other, and we need to lean in on the people that God has brought onto this team and around me, recognize their strengths, recognize my weaknesses, and lean in on that. So
if that's not a motivation for you to go and take the test so that you know yourself as well as your team, I don't know what is. I think you need to know that in order to get the right people in the room. Otherwise, you might have 5 visionaries all in the room and just make a mess.
Definitely. And I probably should have had the link ready for you, but if you Google Les McCowan's predictable success quiz or assessment, you're going to find it. Corey, where do you think let's speak to the ministry leaders that are watching or listening to the podcast today. You work in a local church. You live in this world day after day after day. I want to come to where do we get it right, but let's start with where do you see leaders getting it wrong when it comes to systems and processes?
The evaluation piece, I think, is often missing.
So
we make
true.
the same mistakes year after year.
Yep.
So if I would give you a system or process that you could just start today, is when you finish an event, before you jump into the next thing, before you dream about what could be, just take a minute and evaluate, write down what it is that you yourself want to know for next year, so that you can actually change and not make the same mistakes at your same Halloween event year after year after year.
Why do you think we miss this? Do you think we don't want to do it? Or are we so busy getting ready for the next thing? Why don't we evaluate as much as we should?
I think it's busy. It also takes some humility, because I can evaluate myself and go, you did good again. Good event. Good. You did good. But to get people in the room that are going to give you actual feedback might feel like criticism, and to what I did in my leadership could be better. And I'm going to allow people to give me feedback to help sharpen my axe or sharpen the event that I did, so that next year it actually is better.
Yeah. And, it doesn't have to be, you could start putting some systems in place for evaluation or for welcoming and embracing feedback. And it doesn't have to be that hard, does it? If you just kind of got into a routine that whether it's on Mondays or whenever you have your staff meeting, that part of staff meeting is, hey, let's take 10 minutes and let's evaluate, or after a major event, we just always know that, on the next week, we're going to pull some people in the room and we're going to talk about it. Doesn't have to be super, super complicated, does it?
No, there was a time in kids ministry where I had my template planning event sheet, and it would have
Corey Jones. You would. If anybody would, it would be Corey Jones.
But I added a question at the very end that was actually I added 2. What did I spend money on? And then what do I need to know for next year? So that when the following year I go, okay, I got this Fall Family Frenzy event, and what time did I do it last year? And I'll pull up my sheet from the previous year. It also has, hey, Corey, make sure you actually order the inflatables on time, so that that's not stressful.
Yeah.
That evaluation piece sets me up perfectly for the next year.
Yeah. Is there anything else that comes to mind, Corey, before I move, kind of transition a little bit? Because I want to hear from you if you know anybody, a church or a leader, somebody that gets this right. Is there anything else you want to mention as far as a system that either you see churches not doing like they should, or, man, you got to make sure you get this right? And I think one of them is what you just said, evaluation. There's probably a dozen or 20 that we could talk through, but is there anything else that comes to mind before we move on?
I do see a lot of our Kidman community church leaders getting it right when it comes to the big priorities, that they're figuring out big priorities first. And so sometimes we get so focused in on the small details that we miss the big thing. But in the Kidman world, I've seen some leaders, I'd say I'll go negative first, which is the opposite of what I started with. But you might get so focused on the environment and stage that you miss what am I actually teaching the kids, and do I have the leaders in place? But there's times where kids pastors, I think especially, we give ourselves a hard time because we have a wonderful team and we have a wonderful teaching that the Lord has prepared in our hearts, but our environment it's just okay compared to other churches. And then we go, shame on us. But I go, no, that's you have your system in place there. You have your big priorities in place. Your environment, it might not be the biggest amazing thing ever, but you're discipling kids. You're actually accomplishing your mission. And so
Man, that's good.
Don't get bogged down with the comparison trap, especially if you are doing your big priorities and you're living the way that God's called you to. Don't judge and compare.
I love it. Corey, we've shared a lot about ourselves. Is there somebody that comes to mind? It'd be another pastor, somebody another church that just seems to get this right. And what is it that they get right when it comes to systems? Anybody come to mind?
Man, I don't know if we've done a podcast and talked about a person without me mentioning Jim Weidman. So I gotta give him a shout out.
Yep.
Man, I went through Jim Weidman's coaching program. Back in the day, he called it Infuse.
Yep.
And at the time, I was kids pastor. I oversaw kindergarten through fifth grade. Then I helped oversee the preschool ministry. But I was so stressed, just like the pressure of Sundays always coming. I need this team. And when Jim took me under his wing and said, all right, I'm going to coach you for a while, he showed me like breaking these things down into steps. He helped me figure out job descriptions, and he wanted me to read his book. I read Stretch and Beat the Clock. And then he took it and helped me apply it to my ministry. And so then very quickly, that's how the Next Gen seat opened up for me, because I was at a place where I had margin and my ministry was growing. We added services and everything just continued to go great because I had the system in place for recruiting. I had the system in place for teaching. I had a system in place for caring for my volunteers. And Jim just challenged me, specifically in Beat the Clock. He talks about acting like your time actually belongs to you, to steward it, to make a plan. And, I'm a processes guy and I'm math and numbers. And so what he said resonated so big with me. He said, if I can save 1 hour per day, like just in the office, working on stuff, if I can save 1 hour, that at the end of the year, it's going to be 15 days worth of time of 24-hour blocks.
That's a good point.
Or 45 8-hour work weeks. So an extra 6 weeks of work that could be accomplished by saving 1 hour, by getting rid of 1 hour of distraction, which honestly, for most of us, it's our device. We're not doing what we need to do there. But that 1 hour, having an extra 6 weeks of work to do ministry to kids, it kicked my butt. And I went, man, I'm not stewarding my time well. I thought that I was stewarding my time well, but all of those little blocks of time where I'm wasting time, they add up, and they add up huge. And so I applied what he taught me, and it gave me the margin to be able to do those things that you put on the back burner, like job descriptions and flowcharts. But then having the flowcharts and having the job descriptions allowed me to recruit the volunteers and to keep them, because they knew what they were doing mattered. Yeah. And Jim was just huge in that. I'm a big advocate of what he did in my life.
I love that. I love that you recognize you needed to learn from someone. You found someone that understands the importance of systems and structure, and you joined the coaching program. You read the books. Are there any other thoughts you would get? I mean, for those that are watching or listening, that whether you're by nature a processor type or whether this is a challenge for you, what are some other, I don't know if you want to call them baby steps or first steps? For someone out there, I need to improve. I want to make sure I've got good systems in place. I think one is what you just said, get some coaching, read books. Is there anything else that comes to mind? What can I start doing to grow in this area?
And I think just starting with a little bit of intentionality, going, what goal do I have? How am I going to get there? I meet about once a week with a guy named Jason. He works at State Farm, and he just so happens to love our church. He's not a pastor, he's not ordained or any of those kind of things, but he is somebody who thinks, I would guess he's visionary and then processor secondary. He shows me a lot of times that things like with growth comes complexity, and I might need to either be okay with something not growing. I'm going to count the cost and go, No, my leadership team can be 5. If I grew it to 30, I'd have to do all these things, and I'm okay with 5. That's okay.
Uh-huh.
Or no, I need to count the cost and do the hard work, put the processes in place. So, for instance, your vacation Bible school, if you are expecting 10 kids, the check-in process is going to be very different. The teaching, all of the snacks, just everything's different if you had 100. But then the difference between 100 and 1,000 is also a big deal. And if you're going to want to do something, if God's calling you to do something big, you need to count the cost of that, look at the complexity and the complications of it, break it down into steps, and surround yourself with people that can help. Jason, he's not an author, he's not a podcaster, he's a State Farm agent who loves the church. And every week when I sit down with him, I come prepared with questions. Sometimes they're personal, sometimes it's, what's your morning routine look like?
Yeah,
I want to learn that.
You want to
learn. See, he's a high capacity leader and he oversees a staff and he understands what the complexity of that is. And so I come with questions and sit back and listen. I also sometimes I'll ask a guided question where I am looking for his feedback into me. I want to know what's it like to be on the other side looking at me. I've asked him before, are there themes that I keep bringing up that you see that I'm not dealing with? And so he went, here, we talked about this 6 times. And I go, oh yeah, I haven't applied that yet. And so allow someone to speak into you, surround yourself with people that you can learn from. And it doesn't have to just be a Kinman guru. It could be an old lady who's faithful at a cafeteria. I don't know.
That's a good point. Corey, you're a reader. You listen to podcasts, you read books. You told me the other day that as we're recording this, we're wrapping up 2022. You've read 100 books this year. Kudos.
What a nerd.
I know. I'm proud of you. That's amazing. Very, very proud of you for doing that. And I know God uses that in your life to keep you sharp. Around this topic of the value of processes or systems, is there a book or a podcast or 2 that you would recommend?
Yeah, we mentioned Carey Nieuwhof's podcast. It's long form, so if you're enjoying what we're doing right now, it's very similar. Episode 528 is when we talked about with Les, and so I checked that out. Google that predictability success quiz.
Yes.
You Google those words, it's going to pop up, and the quiz will take you about 10 minutes. And then you can actually, like, I did a course, it was free, but it allowed me to study it a little bit deeper. And then Ryan, when we were talking about like reading and stuff like that, it got me thinking I wanted to share 3 real quick ones. First, there's an app called Libby, Libby, and another app called Hoopla, Hoopla. Those are great places where you can rent books from the library for free. So you don't even need a library card if you give them your address and they'll sign you up for a library card. But it's there's audiobooks and there's actual digital books and stuff like that. And so reading 100 books would be very, very expensive, but I didn't pay for it. I used the library. And so check that out. And then when I sat there last night in bed thinking about, all right, if you would have asked me in college even, is Corey a reader? The answer is no way, like not at all. Fun fact for my senior year, I got the literary award for my school. And as I was accepting the award in front of everybody, I told the lady that gave it to me I didn't read a single book in high school. I was so embarrassed.
That's awesome.
I studied, but I didn't read. But what changed it for me was, and I went back through my Goodreads, it was the book, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. It's one of those books where he looks at cue, habit, reward, and breaks it down into, if you want to do something or be something or accomplish something, what are you going to put in your life to cue you to do it? And so if you want to be a runner, your cue might be pulling out your workout clothes first thing in the morning. And if you do that one cue, you're far more likely to actually work out when your alarm goes, hey, buddy, it's time to work out.
Yep.
And so for me, I read that book. It was a staff read. We're all reading it together.
It's a thick read too, isn't it?
Oh, it's stout.
It's stout.
I got it on my shelf.
Yep.
And I went, I wish that I was a reader. I wish that I enjoyed that, but I just don't. And so I put some cues and habits in my life to make myself far more likely to read. And for me, a lot of it came down to I'm an auditory learner. And so sitting down with an actual book, I'm going to have to read the same page a couple of times. It gives me like a little stress or anxiety. Also, there's so many times when I read, it's 5 minutes before bed, I'm going to just pick up a book and read for a little bit, or I'm in between meetings and I don't want to start another project, but I got someone coming in 7 minutes, and so I'll pick up a book. But having the apps on my phone and using the time that is given to me in these little chunks allows me to do so much more reading. And it is rewarding. It is good to be able to, right now, a lot of the books that I'm reading, for instance, are, I'll talk with Andrew Brooks, my elementary pastor, and he talks about an issue or a topic, and I will read the book for him. I will go, okay, this is a book that I wish Andrew would read, but he's a dad. I don't know if he's going to have the time. I'll read it, and then I'll sit down with him over a meal and do the Spark Notes version for him, basically.
That's awesome.
And it is so rewarding to be like, I have taken the time, sometimes 10 hours, to read this book because I love you and I want you to have this knowledge. So it's a joy, and it's not one of those things anymore for me that is like, oh gosh, I got to read a book, stab myself in the face. It's a way that I can serve people and love people. So
I love that.
I would check out those apps. It's free and easy. Makes it easy.
That's awesome, Corey. I always learn from you every time we talk. All right. I like to end the podcast with these two questions. Number one, Corey, what is something God is teaching you right now or speaking to you about or showing you? And number two, what's something big that you're working on? So let's start with that first one. What's God been teaching or showing Corey Jones these days?
Tuesday night at 9:30 p.m., I sit down with a group of guys for discipleship because of crazy, and that's when our schedules align. And right now we're reading through
9:30 p.m.
Yeah, until about 10:45. It's wonderful.
Okay.
It was either that Monday morning at 3 or 4 a.m. And I was like, that's tough.
Yeah.
All right. So we're reading through Luke right now, getting ready for Christmas. We wanted to study that. Our church is looking at it. And we're reading through the parable of the lost coin, the lost sheep, and the lost son. Mm-hmm. And one of the things my pastor says almost every week when he's preaching is Romans 8:1, that therefore there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, that you have so much freedom and love of God. But it hit me just different. And I shared that with my guys reading through the parable of the lost son, that the father ran to him, put a ring on his finger, robe on his body, killed a big cow, let's party. That it wasn't, here comes that guy that took my money, or I'm going to shame him, or I'm going to condemn him. That God, our Father, really is love, and that's good. And I read that and went, oh God, I needed that. I needed to know, like, for real, there is no condemnation. That you actually like me and you love me.
I love that.
That meant a lot.
I love that.
And what am I working on right now?
Yeah.
See, this morning I was brainstorming. Have you heard of the Global Leadership Summit?
I had that small little event. Yes,
yeah,
I have.
So we talked with one of the guys that organizes it locally, I guess. And our church is weird. So we built a community center that we figured out how to do church inside. So we went from having an established building to being mobile in our own campus. But the why behind that is we wanted to build something that our community would use. And they do. So every month there's 450 to 600 events on our facilities where there's the Rotary groups, the hospitals, the school systems, like all of those different people that come here, blood drives and just bar mitzvahs, barbecues, everything. And they are very familiar with us, and we've established a lot of good relationships with them. But we've been trying to figure out how to take that up a notch, how to do something more specifically around Jesus, that they know that we love Jesus and they are invited to be a part of us in our church and stuff. And they come to us all the time, but we wanted to take it a little step further. And so we met with our CEO of the hospital, and we're trying to figure out how to do the global leadership summit
That's awesome.
on our campus so that all of the different community people can be in one spot. We can talk leadership and Jesus with everyone all in the same room.
Man,
So
what a
I was
great
brainstorming
idea.
what that could be and who our partners could be and what staff could step in to help and put those pieces in place, processing it.
And if you're intrigued about what Corey just said about, and I love that, Corey, that you're doing that, Corey's church and their model, it really is fascinating. Beth and I have been there several times. It does not look like a church. It has a restaurant. It has a daycare. An exercise facility, and you guys do church there, and you did this intentionally. I love it. I know, Corey, you talked about this. You did a breakout, I think, on this at MegaCon, Kids Matter Conference last year. Your church website, Corey, for someone that just wants to go peek and see on the website, or there's a church website, isn't there? Or the two separate websites?
CityStation.org is the building side of stuff. CityStation.org will tell you about a restaurant and our preschool. We have 64 students that live on our campus, and talks about the apartments and what it means to live in a covenant housing stuff. And so it breaks all that down for you. It's just a different way to do church.
Wow.
Our pastor, he's a visionary. So hear that.
Yes.
We outgrew our space. We need to build something, but he didn't want it to be used for 2 hours a week. He wanted to build something that the community would love. Yeah. And so we dreamed of what could be, and took a huge step in faith and built a giant building that's for the community. So it's just a different model.
I love that. Yeah, there's no, I don't know that there are right and wrong ways. I love it that you guys decide as a church, if we are going to spend all this money, let's spend it on something that's going to get used, and not something that's just going to get used for a few hours on Sunday and then sit empty all week long. In fact, you guys, probably the opposite is, it probably gets used more during the week than it does on Sunday. I don't know. It's every day of the week.
Probably 750 people on campus every day. So that's not including anything with church. It's just a different model.
Yeah, I love it. Go check it out. Corey Jones, thank you so much for your friendship. Thank you for everything that you do to make an impact in your community and also in the Kidmin community. You're such a
Brian, I feel weird wrapping up a podcast without asking you a single question, and so I gotta ask one. I hope you have time and you're okay with that.
Yep. Yeah.
You're redoing this podcast. Why?
Good point. Yeah. So I've had the Ryan Frank podcast for several years, and it's taken different forms over the years. But I really love having conversations like this, and I feel like God has positioned Beth and I in this amazing way where we can facilitate conversations. And so I've decided, going into 2023, that we're going to ramp it back up with a weekly conversation like this, not just audio format, but video for those of you that enjoy watching video. And at the end of the day, I want to add value to this community, and I want to encourage you in what you're doing and facilitate great conversations and introduce you to great people like Corey Jones. So, Corey, thanks for jumping in early and doing this interview with me today.
I'm subscribed. I'm not familiar with the YouTube. Is it Ryan Frank podcast on YouTube? What's it going to be there?
Yeah, if you go to ryanfrank.com, I'll have a link to it. We're recording this before we've launched. It will be on YouTube, but I know there will be a link there from ryanfrank.com. Thanks for asking me about that, Corey. Corey, thank you so much. Podcast listeners, thank you for tuning in, for watching. It's been a great conversation, Corey.
Thank you, Ryan.
This episode of the Ryan Frank Podcast has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more conversations to help you stay on the leading edge. And if you like what you've heard, please rate this podcast with 5 stars. Thanks so much, and we will talk to you next time.